It was at Norfolk State is where I graduated. I graduated from Norfolk State in 1961, just before I went to Columbia. And but it was around that time, maybe the year before, that we had the Woolworth 5 and dime store sit-in, and it was our Student Government Association that was leading it. And I happened to be one of the students who participated. We marched down from Norfolk State all the way downtown in Norfolk, and we sat in the diner at the counter. And black people weren't served from there. I mean, you could go in and buy things, but you didn't sit down at the diner on the counter. Mm-hmm. So we sat there, and people were mean and ugly, saying things, but there was no physical violence as such. But they did not like us being there, but we stayed there the whole day, and we managed to get out non-violently because that was the teaching of Martin Luther King at the time. And though there were no formal teachings to us, I mean, we knew about it, or there may be a briefing. Somebody said, oh, you know, this is non-violent. You just do whatever you need to do to not react in a violent manner, just to be passive in your sitting at the counter. People are going to be mean. They're going to say ugly things to you, but just be pleasant and bear it. And that's what we did. So we had I guess, uneventful sit-in in terms of there was no real confrontation, except that the white people had a lot to say about it. So anyway, we walked back to campus, and that was my sit-in experience at Norfolk State. Of course, they did have some more sit-ins, but I didn't participate in all those sit-ins. And when I graduated and went to Norfolk, to Columbia University Teachers College, it was still in the 60s, so there was a lot of volatility and lots of things going on. So even in graduate school, we occupied the admin building, and we sat down. I'm not even sure what the issue was at the time. It probably was something to do with the administration and people being treated fairly all over the world and this kind of thing, more global than just here in America, because we had students from all over the world, and they were all participating in the sit-in. Anybody who was going to Teachers College Columbia University would be there. So we sat in, and the administration finally came down and talked to us, but in terms of what we got out of it, I do not remember, but I remember that was one of the things that we did participate in. Now, let's see, the other thing you might be interested in is my husband and I, we were married in 1965, and he was a professor at Norfolk State, and so was I at the time, because I graduated from Columbia University, and and he graduated from Virginia State College, and he was teaching at Norfolk State at the same time I was. We started in 1963. And at that time, we met and fell in love, and we were married in 1965. Shortly thereafter, because well, the money wasn't that right, and he did not get his he didn't get a raise or whatever it was, and he was in electronics, and he applied for a position with Honeywell. Honeywell accepted him. They had passed some sort of test and all of that, and he did. And so he went to Boston, Massachusetts for this training. And the part of the agreement, because he was married and I was still going to be teaching at Norfolk State, is they were going to bring him back down to Norfolk, Virginia area as an engineer when he left Boston and completed his training. However, once he completed the training and he was certified, he'd done very well in school and all, and they had to come to him and tell him that they could not get him back in Virginia, because Virginia would not hire a black engineer. They would not have a black engineer on site.
And this was 1965?
This was 67, 8. Because after I think he was up there with the training, he didn't leave Norfolk State until '67, so it had to be around '68 that this happened. And you know, back in that time, '68 was Virginia's massive resistance against integration in the state of Virginia for the public schools. They built all kinds of academies, schools and things, private places to send white people, especially so that they would not have to go to school with black kids. That was before they started busing and all that kind of stuff. And then after they did start busing, that massive resistance went on for a few years before finally, I think it was struck down. But Virginia was one of the last people to really integrate, you know that. So at any rate, his supervisor had to sit him down and talk to him and let him know that they could not get him down. Get him down to Virginia to so that he could work on a site. Therefore, he lived in D.C. and I was still at Norfolk State until I think in 1970 he bought a house out here in Prince William County. And then in '72 I moved up. I left Norfolk State. But they finally did have, Honeywell had a site in Virginia and they moved them over to Virginia, but never at that time not down to Tidewater. But by that time we had moved up to this area. So
so this was in the 70s. They still weren't allowing black engineers to have jobs in Tidewater.
Well, I'm not sure whether they would in the 70s. I wouldn't say definitively, but this had already happened to him back in like '68. Mm-hmm. So no, they would not let him go down there in the 70s. Because I remember one incident where in Richmond, they needed, well, he was very good in his field and he won all kinds of awards. And nobody could solve the problem that they had. And they wanted him to come down to Richmond to solve that problem for them. You know, so they would let him come down there to solve that problem, but they did not have any black engineers on site. So that went on for quite a while. I'm not sure. He would have to say when it was exactly that they have black engineers, but I know they have them in Virginia now, I'm sure. Yeah. But at that time, it was hard in the 60s and in the early 70s anyway. So Virginia was a little late coming in with the integration, but most of the time my resistance has always been that when I would go, even though my mother was upset with me about my confrontation with the salespeople, but if any time, even now, if I'm in line and I think somebody is mistreating me or someone else, I will speak up and let them know that, you know, because sometimes people don't make sure that they select the person who is next in line. And if there is a black person, maybe a white person, they usually will choose a white person to help. That is even now, but and sometimes you still do have to speak up, as I do. I said, excuse me, I was first. However, I can see a difference in the way that people behave. For the most part, their attitudes have changed somewhat, because now most of the time, if a salesperson is there and there is a line or something, they will say, who was first? So, I mean, some training has taken place, and so they're aware of this training. But I went through a number of these incidents, or even though sometimes even if the salesperson doesn't recognize it, the other people who are waiting will speak up and say, oh, she was first. She was here before I was, you know. Even if the salesperson tries to help the white person first, that white person will say, she was here first. So that is a different. Back in the day when I was talking about that first time, when I had that confrontation in Norfolk, that was the first one that I really remember. Nobody would have said anything. Like I said, this woman proceeded to help the person who was white, even though she had already recognized us and was going to help us. But when the white person came up, she proceeded to help her. But so I try not to be, unkind, but just speak up, and you can do that without being offensive. I think I said, well, excuse me, I was here first, and that's usually all you need to do. It still happens, and you do have to speak up. And some people won't, though. They would just let whatever happen. So that's why I said maybe I'm an activist, but maybe on a personal level more than like one of the big time leaders and that type of thing. The people who move a whole group of people, but looking out for individual rights as I navigate society.
And that's important.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So where do you think you got this desire to right any wrongs, to be willing to stand up for what you thought was not appropriate?
I think it's not only in my relationships with my parents, but also in, church. What's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. And it's not good to be unkind or to hurt other people or to be disrespectful, because above all, my mother always